Hey, everybody. Jeremy is here again on this wonderful Memorial Day weekend. And yes, if you look at me, I'm a little red. That's what happens when it's over 80 degrees out and you decide to go hiking for like 9-10 miles and you're very Irish, like me. Can't do much about that. It happens. I swear, I put the lotion on. I put the lotion, but it doesn't... I don't know. That's disappointing all around. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to keep going down our list of the Power Rangers seasons. We are at number 12 on the list. And number 12 is going to be a season that I think is very much underrated in the grand scheme of things. And that is Power Rangers Turbo. Yes, Turbo. I think the main reason why it's underrated is because so many people love Zeo. So many people love In Space, and with good reason. Those are great seasons. I haven't gotten to them yet, so clearly there's something right about them. But Turbo's stuck in the middle, and because of it being stuck in the middle, I feel like it doesn't get a lot of love. It has some things working against it. It's a lot less serious than, say, the seasons before and after it. It's very silly with Divatox and her detonators all the time, and it's got bad suits. Well, that's one thing right there. I mean, I'm sorry, people. If you like the Turbo suits, I don't get you. The chrome, all the lines, the dumb little yellow, like, rectangle in the middle, the numbers on the I mean, it's not a good suits, people. They're not good. And, of course, there's Justin. A lot of people don't love Justin. You know what? You're the same people that for many years would just go, I don't like Rocky. Oh, Rocky's not Jason. What? Jason's going, why is Rocky there? Rocky's not as good. Well, guess what? You don't know what you have until it's gone because you lost Rocky and you got a small child. Now, you might not like Rocky, but you probably like him better than a small child with really poofy big old hair. You probably do. Okay? Even though nowadays Blake Foster is a crazy large tattooed mutant man, he's the Justin. Not great. But for me, I think the thing people don't really remember as much about Turbo is it's very much a tale of two seasons. Right before the halfway point, I believe, pretty close to there, that's when we had the changeover. And I think the changeover did the series a world of good. Now, the early episodes, they're fine, but they feel very weak considering the way, the fact that Zeo didn't even have an ending. And we were talking about, this whole world domination, all these amazing things were going on. And now Tommy has poofy hair and he's driving a race car. Yeah, I'm just pausing to let that absorb. He's driving and it's just like, oh, I didn't know. Oh, you're a natural, Tommy. I had no idea I like this. We're not at all shoehorning the driving theme into this season. It was just painful. And I mean, we've heard so many stories about what was going on behind the scenes with Turbo. The way I understand it is that originally they wanted to partially change the cast. Their first plan was to get rid of Tommy and Catherine, just Tommy and Catherine, and replace them with Carlos and Ashley, who, had already been, who you had seen, they'd been in an episode or two together. We hadn't met the other two replacement Rangers. And that would have been interesting. I mean, first of all, Carlos would have been the Red Ranger. That would have been odd. And, I mean, even Ashley would have been the Pink Ranger. And, they tried to have a little bit of a romance there, but they had no chemistry. They really didn't. And no offense to Roger, but Carlos just never did anything for me. I think that rings true for a lot of fans. He's probably the weakest character of all the Turbo and then In Space cast. So to have him as the Red Ranger might have been very odd, so to speak. And then they decided, you know what, let's just completely change the cast. We still have the kid, which, that's fine, whatever. But let's completely change it. And I think that was a good call. Like, say what you will, but when you have a team that is all rookies, much newer, kind of having the sort of sillier villain works. It really ended up embodying old school Power Rangers. And while it did that, there was also an underlying plot that was going on. It wasn't a massive one, but with the whole Millennium message and then the build up to the big finale, like the finale was very, very good. Say what you will about Turbo either way. like, the finale felt, like, strong. It felt real. Like, not since the command center blew up, and I would even argue this was better than the command center blowing up, because, yes, it had a little less impact because we'd seen something similar to it before, but, like, it was a full-on siege, you know, and their helper, you know, their Alpha and their Demetrius, or, sorry, Zordon, were gone. Like, it felt like the stakes were finally getting raised, and you turned Divatox, like, in a second, from some sort of kind of jokish character into one that you really had to take seriously. One that made her movie appearance feel much more valid in the long run. And honestly, I just liked the Turbo cast. Like, they had a really renewed energy. Say what you will, and I think I say what you will too many times, but TJ and Cassie, the original scene of them on the bus, you know, getting off the bus, helping Tommy and Catherine, like, that established so much about their characters. Like, you knew more about them in those 2 episodes, that Passing the Torch 2-parter, than you knew about a lot of Rangers during their entire careers. Like, they had genuine characters. And, like, Cassie had to be convinced that this was the right thing to do. Yeah, of course, TJ was jumping in there right away because, you know, he's going to be the Red Ranger, so yeah, whatever. But, like, Cassie was legit, and while we did kind of have hints of a TJ and Cassie romance more later in Space than in Turbo, though, like, they didn't need each other, and I think that was another big thing. Like, in the past, it always felt like the Red Ranger or the Sixth Ranger, whoever, like, he was so tied to one of the female Rangers, specifically the Pink Ranger, where it was just like, come on, like, can we get rid of this trope already? And they didn't feel locked in like that. Like, TJ was a newer leader, but he also felt like a more open personality. Like, he had a really cool episode with Bulk and Skull. TJ was just a breath of fresh air, and beyond the obvious, beyond the first black leader of the Power Rangers, beyond that, like, TJ was just a really, really strong, believable character that didn't come off as a generic leader. And I think that was very, very important for him as a whole. And yeah, people don't like say, the rapping Alpha, the yo Brooklyn Alpha, and I wasn't a huge fan of that either. But I think this team did a good job of learning on their own and not necessarily needing to rely on Alpha. And, like, having Demetria was interesting because they didn't get straight answers. Like, the Rangers it was really a trial by fire for them, so to speak. Like, it had a lot of the energy of the original MMPR seasons, but it felt like there was more cohesiveness to everything. And I think that was very, very important. And again, it was just a very, very likable cast. So Turbo is one of those seasons that I put in the middle of my rankings because I can sit there and I can say, no, this is not an unbelievably fantastic season. It just isn't. But it's also not a bad season. Like, it knows what it wants to do. It's very consistent, which is key, because so many of these seasons that I've ranked lower than this, they might have better moments here and there than, say, a Turbo, but they lack consistency. Like, when they're bad, they're really bad, or they're just nonsensical. Like, Turbo, yeah, you've got a bunch of detonators, all this silliness, blah, 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 but the show knew what it was. It embraced what it was, and it stayed that way throughout, which is hard to do, especially when you look at Car Ranger. Because Car Ranger wasn't just a sillier Super Sentai season, it was a straight-up parody Super Sentai season. It was like trying to take tropes from the series that had developed over 20 years, and it was trying to turn them on their ear and make them as just goofy as possible. And early Turbo kind of leaned into that too much. Like, even during the first couple episodes, like that, you have this dumb episode where Tommy's just driving around, all the Japanese symbols are still there, trying to find detonators, like, and he's just being silly, you know. It's like, it was just silly as when he's jumping around as the White Ranger, stuff like that, where it just didn't fit. And to have a team that is mostly veterans that have been there for 3 or 4 years, trying to embody that, like, silliness, it just does not work. Granted, Adam in the hammock was glorious. Johnny, JYB, my boy, you in that hammock, when you were sporting them suspenders, whatever, all your nonsense, gold. Absolute gold. So yeah, it is knocked down a lot because of the first handful of episodes. How many episodes was it before Passing the Torch? I want to say like 18 maybe? I don't know, I'll go look it up later. But, so almost half, I think. But yeah, like, so those first handful of episodes, yeah, they aren't the best. But once it gets going, once you have that changeover, it becomes a very, very fun, consistently enjoyable season. So, I mean, I would say to everybody out there, give Turbo another look. If you haven't really checked it out much since its initial airing, maybe skip the beginning, but like give it another look and really, really try to have some fun with it, because I think you'll find that Turbo is better than you remember it being. Okay? On to number 11. Number 11. You might not like this, but yes, it's Time Force. Yes, Time Force. This may rankle you because I know a lot of people out there have Time Force much higher on their list. A lot of people have Time Force as their favorite season. And there is some stuff to like about Time Force. I will not belittle that in the slightest. But I have to talk about the elephant in the room. It's something people have talked about before. It doesn't make it any less true, though. And I have to say it, yes. If you were not a ranger in that series wearing the color red, or a lighter shade of the color red, you got F'd in the A. Straight up, you did. I'm sorry, Katie, Trip, Lucas, you didn't do very much in this series. You only had a couple episodes each that were really focused on you, and most of them weren't that good. Lucas had 2 episodes that were both about his driving. Yes. About his driving. Now, one was a little more personal, but they're both about his driving. And yes, Trip, you had a fun episode about acceptance that was kind of like, you know, had racial undertones to it, which was good. Very, very good. And Katie continued to push forward the theme of the Power Rangers universe that we've learned many times over the years is the Power Rangers universe is one where racism never existed, because whenever we go to the past, nobody cares that there's people there that aren't white. Nothing ever happens to them because of that. It's a very interesting thing, but it's something about Power Rangers that I kind of enjoy, even though it's very odd. But yes, Time Force is another one of those seasons, much like Lost Galaxy, that I would say squandered its theme. You're called Time Force. Most of your team is from 1,000 years in the future. You time travel at the beginning. You time travel at the end. You never time travel anymore throughout that entire show. Like, outside of Katie's, was it a dream? Was it whatever, the photo? I don't know. They don't time travel. They even have to take scenes from the Movie Madness 2-parter, which, as we know, is just them being thrown into other types of movies, and they edit that into the second take of the opening credits to make it appear as if time travel happens in a series where time travel should be a focus, and there is no time travel. That is one of the most egregious errors for me. You can't promise something and not deliver on it. Time Force had so much potential to be better than it was. I hate squandered potential. Like, Time Force has a good cast. I have met all of these people. They are all very nice people. Erin Cahill is the nicest woman on the planet. She is. And the stuff about Jen, like, Jen has some great stuff, but that doesn't make the overall series great. I'm sorry, it doesn't. And Time Force is another one of those seasons. It was during that era where it was like, okay, let's copy the Sentai, but then let's not really add anything of our own. Like, all of the really cool things you might have liked about Time Force, for the most part, they're all part of Time Ranger. Like, that's what it is, and some of the more interesting stuff, they just take out. Like, the Blue Ranger actually has a subplot in Time Ranger about him having a deadly disease that didn't exist in the year 2000, so he can't, like, combat it. He's going to die. Well, he's stuck in the past. Nope, that's gone. That's why Lucas doesn't have any character. The Yellow Ranger, who, yes, was a male in this series as well, has a story. You saw part of it, you know, with the whole photographer that found out Katie's identity. But he has a story where he's dating her, and it's interesting because she's more down to earth and he's kind of like the macho dude, and he's trying to learn to be more sensitive, and they end up getting together, and you know, all this amazing stuff, and it's just not there. So that's why Katie doesn't have any development. It's disappointing that these characters lose so much of their potentially interesting stuff, because they want to homogenize the show. And I know, people complain about this all the time. We're like, I didn't see the Sentai, so you can't judge the Power Rangers season on the Sentai, which has validity to it. You don't have to watch the Sentai, you don't. But you also can kind of notice when stuff is lost as a result of that. If they weren't so concerned about copying the Sentai and then taking out this stuff that was like, maybe that's a little too serious, or we can't really do that in our type of kids show with their mandates, whatever that is, and then you don't replace it with something else, then that directly goes back to the Sentai, and that is your reason for why your show is not as good as it could be. And I also think that it's a show that it tackled some heavier concepts, but then it didn't really give any sort of proper closure, I would say. Like, Nadira and Rancic were redeemed way too easily. Like, I'm sorry, but you did some really awful things, and if it wasn't for time, like, magically changing, you killed Alex. Like, you straight up killed the guy. And there's no consequences because time magically changed and he's alive. And I said it before, like with the whole reinforcements from the future, like, yes, Rancic had some bad things happen to him that spurred him into being a bad guy. I get that. But that doesn't mean you didn't do the bad things, and it doesn't mean you should be automatically forgiven. He spent, what? The time between the end of Time Force and the time up in Wild Force, so less than a year in prison, and now everybody's happy. And Nadira got community service to help children, and everybody's like, you really take away a lot of your impact. That's the thing, is if you're going to be a season that is a little more serious, I'm sorry, I know I used one of the words, the dark, the gritty, the serious, you can't use those 3 words, I'm sorry. But if you're going to be one of those seasons that tries to take itself more serious, you have to follow through. You can't cut your balls off because of Disney standards. Saban standards, whatever standards you want to say. Fox Kids, I don't know. Standards, in general. You can't do that. Because if you do that, you neuter your show and you make everything that you've done before it feel a lot weaker, feel a lot lamer. Like, you have to pick a tone and stick with it. And I think that's my biggest thing for Time Force. Time Force is a season that is squandered ideas. Very, very much squandered. Like, I mean, good lord, what's his name? Gluto? Like, does he do anything? Does he ever do anything in that series? You only had him there because he was the main bad guy of Time Ranger and you just needed some footage of him? Like, he is just useless. Just like 3 of the Rangers are basically useless. Yes, the stuff with Wes and Eric is fine. The stuff with the dad is fine. Like Mr. Collins he is a fantastic character, a great actor. Like, all that stuff. Like, I will praise that until the cows come home. I will. But it just irks me when you have so much wasted potential. Like, you just have all these great, so many good characters just on the table, Like, Time Force disappoints me. Time Force it's more a disappointment than it is actively bad. It's a series where there's just like certain pockets of episodes that are really, really good. Like, if you look at the episodes that say were released on VHS, because there was a time where Power Rangers would release maybe 3 or 4 VHSs of each season. And you'd only get, a handful of episodes, usually from bigger moments. And those episodes for Time Force are pretty solid. They tell a really interesting story. But the stuff in between it is kind of vapid. Because you make it so clear from every time that something that is important in the series happens, you make it so abundantly clear that if it's not happening to Wes, Eric, or Jen, it's not important. It's not. Like, it just isn't. It doesn't hold any weight in the long run. And, like, okay, another thing. Here's another thing for you. Frax. Frax was an interesting character. And he was actually much more redeemable than Rancic because he started out as a very good guy. And everything bad that happened to him was because of Rancic. Like, you can argue that as an AI, like, Rancic manipulated him and made him just this awful character. And so when he fought back against Rancic, you kind of felt for him. You understood where he came from. And then he has this horrible ending again at the hands of Rancic. And he dies, and Rancic is, again, redeemed at the end. Like, it just turns so quickly. It's the same with the whole Jen and Wes not kissing, that I mean, again, I know even the actors themselves said they hate the fact that they didn't kiss. Like, you can't undercut yourself that much. When you undercut yourself, same thing like I said before with Kendricks. When you undercut yourself like that, you ruin all of your goodwill, at least in my book. Again, that's just me. You're probably going to disagree with me on this, because I know there's a lot of love for Time Force out there. Like, there's a lot of love for Lost Galaxy. I got some flack on that one too. But Time Force is a season that, in my book, was unbelievably spotty, and it constantly would take 2 steps forward and take 1 step back. It would. It just couldn't find its feet overall. And yes, it has a darker theme. I know people are going to like that. They just are. Especially, in 2000, most people watching Power Rangers at that time were probably teenagers. Or at least, but people that were still watching it, that are still fans now, that started when the show started, are probably teenagers now, like I am. Like, well, was. Like I was a teenager. So, like, that's what you were craving at the time. And I think that's why a lot of people have a lot of goodwill towards it. But objectively speaking, it never really finds its full voice. And that's why, for me, it's number 11 on my list. And with that being said, all of that venom there, I guess you would say, we are halfway done with our list. We have gotten through 20 through 11. That means we are down to our top 10. We're at the seasons now where they're all good seasons. Honestly, the last 2 seasons I just said were good too. Like, I think for me, the only bad seasons, the truly, truly awful seasons, are the 2 Neo Saban seasons, the Megaforce and the Samurai, the trio of the cliche awful trio, the Overdrive, the Jungle Fairy, the Mystic Force, those 3, and like that's really, and then the MMPR season 2. Like, outside of those ones, I would say everything, even Lost Galaxy. I'm not a huge fan of Lost Galaxy. It has some good points, but those few ones are the only ones I would say were just awful bad seasons. And Wild Force. Sorry, I gotta remember what I've even counted down. But those are the really, really bad scenes. Everything else, I would say, has merit on some level. Like, even though I have Time Force down at 11, it's not a bad show at all. Not a bad show. It's just far from my favorite. Again, there's 10 better ones for me. So, we're going to get to some more of the interesting seasons. I hope you stick around for that. I hope you like this video if you like it. I hope you comment if you want to discuss the seasons with me. I hope you subscribe to this channel if you haven't. I always appreciate new subscribers. And above all else, I hope you share this video with your friends, other Power Ranger fans, people you think just might find it interesting, people who you think might want to see some Irish guy from Michigan with a beet red burnt sun face, like this right here. Yeah, this guy right here. Look like a photo negative on my arms. Anyway. So yes, I will see you soon with a Loot Anime unboxing that's coming up very soon. And I will see you in a few days with the start of our countdown of the top 10 Power Ranger seasons. That is it. See you soon. Shift into Turbo!